now that the epoxy is hardened, as you can see, I'd let it sit. It was real cold in here. I think it got below freezing, so I let it sit about almost 20 hours. Now we're ready to go in there and take that out. And typically, you'd think a sand roll would be the way to do it, but what I found is to remove the bulk, I'll actually use one of my finger tools and go in there and get the bulk of it. And when I start getting close to where the tube is, then I'll switch to a sand roll. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of cleanup and how I make sure the epoxy's all out of there, and then we'll go on to putting the guides in. I'm going to show you, I use a just a mild cross-cut burr. If you see that orange, that's actually rust. That quick, and this humidity, and you know the cold, me coming out here in the mornings and lighting the place up made it sweat, so I'm having to douse them in WD-40. I had to go back through the entire head with a mild burr, which that's okay. I didn't really mind it because this ain't near as aggressive, and it does a really nice job as far as blending. But I had to go all the way back through it. Look at my chambers rusted up on me, so it's just terrible. I hate this time of year. But anyway, I stay away. I can see about where the hump is. So all I'm doing, yeah. Yeah, all I'm going to do is that right there, because I can go in there with my sand roll and touch it. I don't want to beat around with this on the tube. But, yeah, that's just something else about that rust. Now, that epoxy will sometimes, see, it's around the valve guide. I'll tell you what, this is one of the best shape guide to roof deals I've done in a long time as far as on a set of humps or something. I really like how this has come out. It's beautiful. It ought to have some really kick-ass mid and high lift flow numbers. All right, I'm going to go ahead. You see how I ground that out with this burr? I'm going to finish that. Then I'm going to show you what you got to do inside the tubes. Because remember when I pushed that tube through, look how much epoxy it collected, inside the tube. So I have to go in there with a sand roll and polish all that out, and then of course polish the tops. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do that and finish removing it before we go on to the guides and then the valve job. All right. Look how orange. Oh, Lord. I mean, I just did them. Look how rusted they are. Think about it. If Mr. Imhoff got that, he thought they'd probably been outside in the snow and ice for a month. Now, as you can see, like I said, where I pushed the epoxy through on the tube, shoving it in, and I'm taking a real thin special burr that I use for doing this. And I just lightly touch the top. I don't want to deface that bolt area. I just knock it in. I'm going to go in there with a sand roll and do that. But you always have to take a burr. Now, remember, do not put a lot of pressure left, right, or anything else. You're just trying to take a straight dive in. Because all we're trying to do is just knock the heavy stuff off so we can get a sand roll inside there. Okay, and then once we're done with that, of course, we're going to rotate it around. See, I still left that. I got to hit it with a sand roll. And then, of course, come in here and hit this here. I just go in there, like I said, just so I can slide a sand roll in there. So now that I got that ready and peaked, got almost all that done, I'm going to take and switch from my carbide burrs to I believe a 3/8 diameter sand roll and start cleaning all this up in the tube holes and on the top and dress that and then blend that, and then wow, we're going to be ready to put guides in. Okay, I'll show you that last part when I do it. Then I take a small 3/8 roll, and sometimes it still won't fit, so you got to kind of peel it where it just barely fits in there, and then you make a round. And you just make one little round like that right there, like a little bevel. So that way you won't have no problems with your head bolts going in. And then you got to keep looking down the tube with a light behind it to make sure there's not any epoxy deposits. Once you do that, then you got that clean and you're ready to go on that end right there. So that takes care of inside the tube, a small little radius and a chamfer, so when you're trying to line the head bolts in there, you don't have no problem. Last thing left is the top. This is kind of a tricky part because you don't want to have the head re-spot faced on this. So I take a brand new sand roll, and what I do is I kind of go around the edges. And that gets all, and then just lightly tap it. Now that ain't going to deface it where when you put the washer on there, it ain't perfectly level. You can only do one per head, because what'll happen is it'll round it and then it won't get in here and dig. You don't want no epoxy anywhere on top where that bolt hole goes. Alright, so that concludes, that's the work you have to do to the tubes. I mean, it's not hard, but it is tedious, and then all the blending, I had to go back through all the ports to get all the epoxy, the oversplatter out of it, so there's some time in it, but is it worth the gain? Heck yeah, it's worth the gain. Alright, the intake ports are now finished. They're all cleaned up. The epoxy is blended into the tubes. All the excess is out of it. Had to do a little cleanup on it all the way around. Let's take a look at what we got now. Looky there. Look, you can barely see the tube. That's what you're wanting. You just want to barely see it. Now let's look straight down in here. What a difference. Remember that right here, if you take a string and put the string right here and follow it through the ramp and come all the way to the valve, that is the shortest distance for the airflow to come as it first opens the valve, which is at 100 lift. It's going to channel everything it's got right here. That's why moving that is so important on round track or low to mid RPM stuff, is that charge it gets when it's initially open. Well, now we got that wall straightened out because of that head bolt hole. Alright, now what I'm going to do is finish up polishing the exhaust. Oh, I might add something on that. Let me back off a minute.